Shalom and welcome to the Nomadic Homesteaders podcast. Tom and Sarah here, and as we are preparing for the spring feast season, they are right around the corner. Coming up basically this weekend is Passover, the beginning of unleavened bread, first fruits, and we're here at our friend's house in Scotland and preparing to celebrate this time. It felt like a good time to talk about this topic of seeking the ancient paths and digging into the things that have been left behind and that we're honestly rediscovering now. In Jeremiah 6:16 it says, "Thus says Jehovah, stand in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths, where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for yourselves." And it's that warning of, down a few verses in verse 19, it says, "Hear, O earth, see, I am bringing upon this people even the fruit of their thoughts, because they have not listened to my words, nor my Torah, and they rejected it." In our time of being over here in the UK, specifically, in Europe in general, but specifically here in the UK, it has been really interesting, the things we've discovered in terms of the ancient paths and the ancient people that we come from. We'll get into that as we go, but I thought today having a discussion between, and my notes just disappeared, just having a conversation about the comparison or the kind of dual topic of seeking the ancient paths of homesteading, as well as rediscovering the Torah and its importance to our lives and our walk with God.
Yeah.
So one of the things that came up in just thinking about this was how both seeking the Torah and the things taught in the Old Testament, that is not a new thing. It is obviously, it's the old things that we're seeking, but even that rediscovery of it. King Josiah, the young King Josiah, he rediscovered the Torah when they were cleaning out God's house, and it's not a new thing to rediscover that we, guess what, haven't been walking in the ways of the Lord, and we need to turn back to them.
Yeah, but we had heard that a lot, and you see that a lot. If you try and Google Messianic or Torah observant or Nazarite, when you look at those, you're going to find a lot about the Nazarene, but I know the Torah observant ones.
Nazarene, yeah, similar.
Yeah. But I know when you look those up, a lot of it will say, "Oh, this is a new thing that has come up in the last 40 years," because I looked it up and this is what it told me on Google. It's a new thing that came up in the last 40 years, and it's just like a new off-spin thing. A lot of people think it's a cult. New fad. Yeah. But it's not a cult because there's no leader. There are certain leaders who have been in it for a long time, but there's not a leader of it. Because it's just simply going back to actually doing, like, following Yeshua, which we all say that we do. We grew up saying that, wholeheartedly, so we totally understand that, because that's how we were. But we also knew if people pushed and said, "Okay, so do you eat the way that he ate? Do you celebrate the same feasts?" And those kind of tend to be, and then Shabbat. Yeah. Those are kind of some of the big things. Right.
'Cause in general, most everyday Christians generally keep the majority of the law. Yeah. The commands that God gave Moses and the nation of Israel in generally, we walk in line with most all of it. Yeah. And so this is a few things.
Yeah. So, but it's not a new thing. Talked with kind of starting from here going back, and there's places all around the world, and the remnant is everywhere. But we learned from friends that back in the 1920s, a group was started here in England, I think, or maybe it was in the US, I'm not sure. It's tied with England. And they were similar. They were called the Sabbath Keepers. And then going back farther, I believe, I haven't done an in-depth search on this, but we kind of started looking because it was like, is that true? Is there anyone else? Because if there's not, then it is a cultic new thing. and we don't want anything to do with it. But looking back, there were rumors that we heard about different things, and so just looking into it more is the Pilgrims. Yeah. And I remember growing up and being taught that Puritans and the Puritans and the, I just pulled a blank.
Separatists.
Separatists, thank you. So the Puritans wanted to purify the church. Any of you who went to Bible classes will probably remember this. The Puritans wanted to purify the church. The Separatists wanted to separate from the church.
We were Catholic Church.
I don't think Catholic Church is the Church of England.
Yes,
but
right.
Yeah. But they wanted to kind of separate away from that. But we were told, and so they believed a few things different, but it basically was Protestantism, and that's just what we were told and taught. But it turns out that the Separatists, who were the Pilgrims, who came over on the Mayflower, they actually did, like, they believed some things that were different than us, but it's surprising that we actually now believe a lot of the same kind of things.
Yeah.
They believe they had kept the Sabbath, on Shabbat, on Saturday, Sabbaton. They kept that. They ate clean. They just followed what Yah's word says in the Torah, in the Old Testament. It says it. They celebrated the feast days. And William Bradford, who's not the first governor, he died, but the second governor, the main governor that we know about with the Plymouth township, he actually wrote in his diary, it's like, we were just reading about that. It was like 1,000 words, I think, in Hebrew or something.
Yeah, or that it was something like,
and he translated
recorded that he knew 1,000 words in Hebrew.
Yeah, it was.
And was very passionate about learning Hebrew and seeking to study it so that he could understand the original biblical text better. Yeah,
which I know a lot of pastors do. Like, a lot of pastors learn it and want to learn it for that. And we want to learn it also, but just, but they didn't just learn it for that. They also actually, like, applied it to their everyday lives. Yeah. And so it's just really interesting finding out about that. So that's in the 1600s. And they separated. One of the reasons why they separated is because they were following the Tanakh. Like, they were following the Torah. And so in England, they got persecuted for that because they weren't celebrating Shabbat or the Sabbath on Sunday like everyone else was and had to. Like, they were doing it on Saturday. Yeah. And so so that was interesting. And then I saw something, or you sent me, I think, several articles you'd heard from somewhere about St. Patrick.
Yeah, you're the one that dug into it further.
Yes.
But
you sent me
basically there was some hint, I saw some hint of St. Patrick actually being someone who was keeping Torah and not so much a character, like basically the Catholic Church after the fact, it seems. They went back kind of and rewrote history and claimed him as a saint of the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah. Whereas it appears that he was a guy that was keeping and teaching the Torah.
Yeah. From what I was seeing, so I looked a lot more into the Pilgrims because my grandfather was Robert Cushman, and he actually was one of the ones who, he and another man were the ones that actually hired the Mayflower for the Pilgrims to go over. He ended up not going over, and his son, Thomas, they ended up not going over because he was having, I think it was heart issues, I believe. Yeah. And so he didn't go across on the Mayflower, but his son Thomas, he took his son Thomas the next summer. They went across over, and he left his son with actually Governor Bradford when he was 14 to raise him. And so he grew up in Governor Bradford's house. And then he ended up marrying Mary Allen. I believe her name was Mary Allen. Yeah. Mary Allen. She was the last living pilgrim that sailed on the Mayflower. And so Thomas ended up marrying her. And so she actually so relatives were on the actual Mayflower. And then Robert and his son Thomas weren't. Anyhow. But so I just have, and we're here in England, and so, or the UK. But when we're in England, looking into that and studying about that, because I have a passion for learning where we came from. I believe it's important. I've seen it throughout the Bible. It's like specifically mentioned going back and the importance. And even if we don't understand all the importance of knowing where you come from and your lineage, I think it's important if you can find it out. And in this day and age, even like your family, we found out, and his grandparents didn't talk too much about their parents and their childhood and family members. And so they just didn't know anything. But I was able to find with the internet and everyone finding out about their family histories, I was able to find and trace back. Actually, for yours, we're back to almost the first or second century. So that was really cool. Anyhow, and we'll get there in a minute, but that kind of spurred a lot of being interested with the Pilgrims, and then hearing this, looking into it, and seeing it was indeed. So I did a lot more study on the Pilgrims. But the thing about St. Patrick was interesting because we found out that Tom is actually from Scotland. Both sides of his family that go all the way back, and Ireland.
Not nearly, way more than I realized. I knew there was some, but not near as much.
And like over 1,000 years ago, back to Ireland. And so, so St. Patrick, and I always thought he was interesting, but hearing about that, so I looked into it a little bit. So if you want to look into it more, please do write in the comments below if you find anything, because I'm actually, or get in touch with us. We're actually really interested in this.
And we're not experts in this stuff. We're just bringing it up because we found it very interesting, especially with the walk that Yah has us on right now. And so this is just, we're throwing it out there for you to consider and to look into for yourself.
And so for those of you interested, if you want to look more into it, so there's a 15th century Gaelic work known as the Book of Lismore, Lismore. It actually says, so I did look into this. It was from what I can tell, it's a copy of a lost book. And they found this book, the Book of Lismore, in the Lismore Castle in the 1980s, I think it was, where they found this book. It was in the walls of the castle. And it talks about this other, I think it's just a copy of this other book. And so it talks about it, and this is what it says. So the thing is, I looked into it and I tried to find it. I found it online. It's in Gaelic, and I don't speak in Gaelic. And at the moment, we don't know anyone that I'm aware of that speaks Gaelic. So I can only go from what I've seen or other people said this is how what is translated. But I know that it is not necessarily top tier on that because it's from someone's website, and I understand this. But what they said is that the Book of Lismore says, the learned declare that he was of the Jews by origin, since it is manifest from the miracles which God wrought for him, that he was of the children of Israel, for of them were the Jews besides. For when the vengeance was inflicted by Titus and Vespasian, the Jews were scattered throughout the world, and Patrick's original kindred came to Britain, and there a heritage has gotten them by them. For in a certain book of his epistles, Patrick himself declares something in, I think it's in Latin, and it says, wherefore from that dispersion his original kindred came to Britain. And then it also talks about, in addition to this record, there's also a medieval written record, originally in Gaelic as well, titled the Book of Leinster, Leinster. And it says, in this it is stated that Patrick may have been descended from the sons of Israel, when the sons of Israel were banished by Titus and Vespasian into slavery to the four corners or quarters of the world in revenge for the blood of Christ. His ancestors came to Britain. The tract from which this comes also says that it is because of Patrick's descent from the sons of Israel that God gave him lordship of baptism and belief in Ireland and the banishment for demons from it. So it is interesting that it talks about that in those places. To build on the two records of it, there's also a book called The Roots of Irish Monasticism by Winthrop Palmer Boswell, and he proposes that the Irish of Patrick's time were of Samaritan descent, claiming his own belief that there were direct links between Samaria and Ireland. And so there are actually quite a few books on that, so it is interesting. And what I saw in another article or two is that it said that what they believe is that when you look at what they question the two works that Patrick is known for, and there's decent reasons to question those, But basically what they said is that Patrick, what they believe is that when you look at the Celtic Church, which we're interested in because of this the connection with Scotland.
Yeah.
The Celtic Church, what we are told about, may or may not be what it is, because almost everything was wiped out of the Celtic Church. Like, all the actual legitimate history books, the books were wiped out or burned or whatnot, stolen. And so there's not much actually that people know about the Celtic Church that is actually like tangible that we can have today.
Yeah. And most like the feeling that I've always had about when I hear about Celtic Church is it feels more like pagan in nature, or like, oh, don't look into that because it's full of black magic and pagan ritual stuff and spirits and so it's just that kind of taboo topic basically. But it has been interesting. We've seen little things surface here and there about like maybe the roots of the Celtic Church or something, actually walking in the ways of God and actually, walking in Torah.
Yeah, and a big part is they used to celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday. It wasn't on Sunday, and that was a huge issue with the Roman Catholic Church when they came in, hundreds of years after Yeshua, and they were really strong trying to put that in. What I heard, basically, the story is when that Patrick was born in Scotland, in Celtic, and some people say he was born in Wales. It depends on where you go, but from these two books, it sounds like he was in Scotland. In Scotland, went across, learned about the Celtic Church, and it talks about him saying like his father was a priest, or his grandfather was a priest, and his father was a deacon or an elder. I forget the word they use. That word, though, it's interesting because that could be in the Celtic Church. It doesn't have to be in the Church of England or the Roman Catholic Church. Like, it could be in the Celtic Church. And if that's the case, then it does change things. And so then he went back over, when he got to know Yeshua, he actually went back over to Ireland and talked to them.
No speak.
And they started following the old ways, the ancient paths.
Yeah.
They started following Torah observant or messianic. And so Torah observant, what we use that, we know that Jewish people are included under that. We understand that. But when we talk, what we understand of Torah observant right now is you hold the Torah and the teachings of Jesus. Like, you hold both. It's not just one or the other, or one above the other, or you get rid of it.
And you're just observing in Scripture how Jesus, Yeshua, that's how he walked.
Yeah.
He basically modeled a perfect life, and in his teachings he was explaining, this is how you keep the commandments that you already have, that God already gave to you on Sinai, and throughout the ages, through the prophets and the patriarchs and the priests. The nation of Israel, the people of Israel, who we are grafted into in Christ, in Yeshua, that's what we're supposed to live like. And Jesus, Yeshua, modeled that perfectly, and he showed and helped the disciples were walking in it too. And Yeshua was just clarifying and explaining what was already there.
Yeah. And so with Patrick, when he went to over there, apparently the Roman Catholic Church couldn't get their feet because so many people came to know the gospel, and they saw that it was important both to have the faith and belief in Yeshua, Jesus, as well as following the commandments of Yah, the Father, Abba Father, to do both. And so so they said that he went over, so he died, and they couldn't get, so they decided to, a couple hundred years after he died, they decided to basically make him a saint, because so many people in Ireland respected him, and so many people in Ireland loved him. And so they realized the way that they could get to the people in Ireland is and get them to actually follow what they wanted, is if they made him a saint.
Yeah.
And so that's
spin the narrative,
to spin it how they want it to be, and write stuff. hundreds or 1,000 years later that were supposed to be from him. So it's very interesting. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, look into it.
Yeah.
Tell us what you find and what
digging.
you see. And just saying that I don't believe that because that's not what we're taught in church. We've learned that doesn't really work with us. We really need, there is with the internet especially, there's so much out there. A lot of it you have to know right what words or keywords to say. Google, I would suggest doing other search engines like Brave or DuckDuckGo or something else, although those are kind of annoying. But Google does, I've found personally that it has hidden stuff. So
and bury it.
Yeah. So that was just interesting.
We want to take a quick break and tell you about Heirlooms Evermore Seed Co. We sell 100% non-GMO heirloom garden seeds. Heirloom means that the seeds, the varieties are all open pollinated. And so that means that they're not hybridized. They're not mixed with other things. The thing with hybrid seeds is, you get an amazing tomato that is, has traits. It produces more bountifully and looks the right color and all this stuff. But if you take those seeds out of that tomato and plant them in next season's garden, it won't produce that same variety of tomato. It'll be a tomato, but you don't know what it's going to be. You don't know what its traits are going to be, disease resistances and stuff like that. So to have true sustainability and be able to have the option of saving one generation of seeds to plant as the next generation and get true to type varieties year after year, you need to use heirloom seeds.
They're also a lot more disease resistant, and they grow to your specific climate. Because there are so many microclimates all across the world. And so you can get ones that are in your zone, but to be in your specific microclimate, when you can actually take those seeds again and replant them, because we've done that, and have seen that they actually are hardier, a little hardier the next year, and a little hardier the next year. So it does actually work with that too.
Our friend Farrah McGuire started Heirlooms Evermore in 2006 when she discovered that Azure Standard Co-op, also owned by mutual friends, the Stelzer family, they didn't sell heirloom garden seeds at the time. And so she started providing them. She found seed providers that had long track records of excellent germination, high quality seeds, and very strict standards. They kept to the Safe Seed Pledge and all this. And so she started providing affordable heirloom garden seeds to Azure Standard customers. Then in 2018, she gave the company over to us to run and take over. And that's when we started up our own website and direct to customer seed sales, in addition to still selling on Azure. It's technically ours still, but we're in the process of selling it actually to our neighbor in Idaho, as well as our main contractor and office manager that has been running it for us the last couple years, and that is Mary Lee. It's springtime, talking about spring feasts and getting ready for the new year that's just kicked off. If you haven't got seeds for your garden yet, check out heirloomsevermore.com, and you can get set up with fast growing heirloom seed varieties. Heirlooms Evermore has always leaned toward northern climate gardening, in particular. And so all the varieties we stock are, for the most part, they cater especially for short growing seasons. So if you're in the north, like we were in North Idaho and Washington, they grow fast so that you can make sure and get it between your last frost date and your first frost date. But also if you're in a warmer climate like we were in southern Missouri, you can get multiple crops in per year. So they grew great down there as well. It was amazing.
Because you can always do now in the spring and then through the summer, but there's also the fall is so late when you're in the south, as you know, if you live down there. And so it's nice being able to have them get for sure in that time frame.
Right. And in Missouri even, we found that there was such a heat wave in the middle of summer that a lot of stuff would bolt and stuff of the longer growing varieties. And so we were, with those short season varieties, we were able to get a quick season in. I'm not sure if spring to you is on the left or right with how the camera is. We have it hanging upside down, and so it's all reversed. Anyway, you have the spring season. You can get a quick crop in that you can harvest before that summer heat kicks in. And then when that summer heat is dying off, you can plant your fall garden and have time still before that first frost.
Yeah.
So anyway, check it out, heirloomsevermore.com.
Yeah.
So now shifting the conversation over to the homesteading side of things. And I'm going to say homesteading and a family-centered culture, because both of those things fit into that category of being old ways that are now being sought out again.
For many people.
Yeah. And there's so many reasons. I mean, there's a reason it's a popular movement these days, with the uncertainty in the political climates and governments and wars and climate, things happening. The grand solar minimum is on its way.
But it's also just with the health of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
With your children and wanting them to be healthy.
Right.
And just seeing all the stuff that's in it, which is a big reason, like over here in Europe, it's been incredible knowing that they are so strict on their agricultural stuff, which we love, because we know that buying the stuff, we're not going to have all the junk that there is in a lot of the stuff. Yeah. Not as much.
Yeah. And so again, the homesteading, or this move for sustainability, there's a new wave of it, but it's, again, you're seeking an old thing it's not like it's homesteading is a new fad and it'll wear off in a couple of years. No, we're actually going back to a more sustainable traditional model of living that our ancestors did long before us, and it's how they got to us.
It works.
We have come to lean so comfortably on fragile infrastructures and supply chains and stuff that we have forgotten, and the Western culture push for higher education and women having careers and men having less blue collar careers and more, tech jobs and stuff like that. We've just forgotten so many of those skills that literally keep us alive every day.
Yeah. And when people look at it right now, we know, because we're so deep into the homesteading movement that we know all the fights, and we've met all the different people that believe the whole gamut in the homesteading world.
Regarding how you
define homesteading, how you added it. But what I have to remember is that, because we know people who literally said, unless you build your house with wood cut from your land and you put everything into it and you build all the fences and you do all the stuff yourself, you're not considered. And you're off-grid. And you're off-grid. Yeah, that's right. You had to be off-grid. You can't call yourself a homesteader at all. And it reminded me of a show, a really good show, if you guys want to see it. Now we're like, what? The Canadian. It's the first, so it was before Survivor. It was the year before Survivor. And Survivor, in America, it kind of sparked the whole reality TV show series.
Quest, isn't that it?
Yes, good job. Pioneer Quest. Yeah. So that was like the very first kind of reality show. And it's super really well done. Yeah. Really interesting. And so it's up in Canada, and they had two couples, a younger couple and an older couple. And it was interesting seeing their views. They had very different views on what homesteading meant. And the younger couple literally kept saying things like, we're supposed to do it on our own. Like, we're supposed to be off on a mountain, building everything by ourselves and doing all this. And the older couple got to know the Hutterites,
that were in the area.
That were in the area, like a Mennonite kind of. They learned, and they used all the old stuff, and so they would meet with them for church services, and then they would eat with them, and they'd come over and help them, garden, or they do the mowing for the hay. They helped them out a lot. And so it was interesting. And they said, no, how homesteaders actually lived and worked is they did it in community. And so it's very interesting seeing those two different ideas just so strongly on the screen. It was very, very interesting. And it was good to know, so whenever I think about that or talk with people about it, I think about that show. I also think about, you go back to Laura Ingalls Wilder. Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie series, she actually like her parents were homesteaders. Like that's what they were, like back when the actual Homesteading Act was going on.
Right.
But her dad, they moved how many times? Many times. So that's why when we said we're nomadic homesteaders, I think of that. I'm like, oh yeah, well, Laura Ingalls Wilder does it. Like,
it was kind of seasonal too, because in the summertime, Pa Ingalls would be on the farm, you know, working the land and growing crops and working with his animals and all that. But in the wintertime, often they would move into the city, into the town, and he would work for the sawmill or whatever and do handyman work around town to pay the bills and buy their food, because they weren't, you know, they were living off what they could save up, and the rest they had to buy. Yeah. And so to pay for that, he was working in town. And
so they were very like, so just to remind people and to have that idea also in your head, because as you go back, I believe as you go back throughout history, I mean, even you look at the ancient Egyptians, the Sumerians, the ancient American indigenous peoples. When you look at that, even through cultures throughout history, there's a reason why people, I believe, are in community. Yeah. Like they are supposed to be in community. You're not supposed to be a lone wolf all by yourself. Yeah. And so it's interesting as we've been learning about that and stuff, and just seeing how that is part of it. So like it is an old thing, because I mean you can go back to Laura Ingalls Wilder, you can go back and back, and like I said, you go all the way back throughout history. Yeah. And it's that way. And there are good things about modern life. Don't get us wrong. Obviously, we're online, so we do use and love using modern stuff. But we also know that there are some things, like we do make our own deodorant, because we can't find any deodorant that we like that is natural in the stores, and it's expensive, but it doesn't work. Yeah. And so like we do some of our own stuff, make our own toothpaste, tooth powder. So we do our own stuff like that. But we do also use electricity and on, you know, we're still on grid. Right.
For the time being, we're putting the pieces together to be able to be off-grid more.
Yes, we are.
And especially living in a caravan right now, living nomadically, it would be really handy not to be having to be, you know, plugged into utilities every night. Yeah. So we can go about a night just on battery power, and we have a minimal amount of solar that we can temporarily set up. Yeah. The rest of our setup is in Portugal that we're waiting to go back and get hopefully soon. So we can get stuff more set up to be able to go out into the wilds and
be self-sufficient.
You know, be more self-sufficient for times. But again, it's within that balance of finding community and living within community, and not just being an island unto ourselves, because that's not what life's about.
And again, if you can't do it all yourself. I don't think. No. Like, I grew up in the Philippines, and so when you look at the tribes in the villages and stuff, every single person in the village didn't just do everything themselves. Right. Like, they didn't all make their own clothes, and their food, and their bread, like get the grains,
and raise all the types of
animals.
And raise
all the animals. And like one family wouldn't do all that, unless you go into like cousins and and then maybe, but you have people. Right. It's not just a couple doing it themselves, or a couple and a couple kids doing it all themselves.
And it's so much more efficient to you know, it's good to spread yourself out a bit as far as be a jack of all trades and know how to do all of the things, but it's so much more efficient if Joe is good at raising sheep and he doesn't like chickens so much, but you love chickens and you have a smaller amount of land available to devote, then why don't you raise the chickens and trade eggs and poultry and chicken meat to Joe, and he can give you lamb.
And that's something we did with our friends in Missouri, actually, right before we left. Yeah. Some good friends, they had moved on and they were building their house. And so they didn't have a place yet to put chickens, but they had milk cows. And so we were exchanging eggs for milk, which was fantastic. Awesome. It was amazing. Yeah, that was cool. That was a huge blessing. And so if you can find those areas and the groups, that's kind of a big part what we see as homesteading and getting back to the old paths. But it's also, as we just talked about, tying it in with family too. Because you mentioned that with the family ways.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What was on here? You had mentioned one of the earliest like things that triggered an awareness of the need to dig into these old skills. Were you saying Hurricane Katrina?
Oh, yeah. Like nowadays, when you talk to people.
In our lifetime.
In our lifetime.
Yeah.
I really think I enjoy talking and visiting with people.
Surprise.
Yeah. And so, in talking with a lot of homesteaders, and through the ladies' homestead gathering that I was really involved in for a while, and talking to people, a lot of homesteaders got into it, like the modern ones. A lot of them got into it because there was a key. And we've talked about this before, but there's a key point, a key thing that happens. Often it is a stress,
like a
like
key event in your life.
A key event. Yeah.
Makes you realize that you're vulnerable.
Yeah. And so a lot of that happened, like a friend who got into homesteading. I'm talking about serious homesteading. Like, I'm going to sell everything and move out onto land and just make it work and get the animals and do the garden, like make it work. I think one of the things for like our generation, how old we are now, was Hurricane Katrina, and seeing how the people who were involved in that learned that to be self-sufficient is good, and to rely on the government and expect, because like up to that point I had believed, the American government, they'll just come in on any national emergency. They can fly in or parachute in or do anything or drive boat in, like no matter what the situation is, they'll be there and they will do everything. They got your back completely. And that didn't happen. And people got in trouble because they hopped into a school bus that was sitting there, and they went back and they rescued a whole bunch of people and drove in. But it wasn't a government worker. And so they got in trouble. And I remember hearing about that and just realizing that, and just the fact of all these big cities that we're in, if something happens, natural disasters specifically happens in those places, like getting out can be hard. Like it's going to get plugged up. That's what happened in Hurricane Katrina. But the most recent one in our modern time is what happened in North Carolina and Tennessee. Yeah. And we had a lot of friends, people that we know that were homesteaders specifically, that were there, and this is where we understand that homesteading is not the end all be all, because a lot of their stuff got wiped out. Yeah. So that's where we have just chosen to do more homesteading, looking at the ancient paths and also the knowledge that goes along with that. As homesteaders, they often like to learn knowledge and stuff. So if everything does get taken away, or if you end up selling stuff and moving halfway around the world, we still can carry the knowledge of learning how to be self-sufficient with us wherever we go. Yeah. And so that's a huge part. I think that's a difference between homesteaders and say preppers and whatnot. And I know that there's overlay on that, but that's just a difference of those who intentionally define themselves as rebels. Yeah. Yeah. And I touched on it a little bit, but so one interesting thing happening right now in the worldwide arena is the whole tariff thing happening right now, with Trump imposing tariffs and those other countries imposing tariffs back, and just all that craziness that's happening right now. It's really interesting to just observe and think through how it's actually affecting people. Tough. Number one, the tariffs being imposed. So if you're an American, yes, technically I think it can be debated for sure, but I think in general it's okay to have tariffs imposed on other, imports from other countries, in that it will motivate the U.S. to produce its own goods. I see it totally from that perspective. I don't see it in the time frame that it's been happening, because you need lead up, you need lead time, and just perhaps some incentive for the U.S. U.S. businesses to ramp up and actually fill in that void before you make a void and make prices go through the roof, just by imposing the tariffs immediately. That's coming from business. Owning our own businesses. Yeah. So but so in one way it's hurting the people who end up, the end customer. It's hurting them because they're paying higher prices.
because of the tariffs. But it's interesting too because it's providing opportunities for various countries and companies to just rise up and fill in where they see opportunities. We were even seeing some word of like just companies that are realizing that other nations, like Albania was one of them, where they were realizing, we only have a 10% tariff right now, whereas a bunch of the neighboring countries were like 30% or something. And so there's a little opportunity for somebody to start, producing something that the U.S. would pay for, and get some economic activity going in that realm.
So we don't usually talk about political stuff on here,
right?
But this is actually a big thing right now.
Yeah.
So I haven't looked in the last couple of days, mainly because we are in Europe.
Yeah.
And we have friends who have brought it up.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't heard a lot or seen a lot about it, but it's because of what happened last week. Like a lot of people are indeed, apparently more people are talking about it because people who usually don't talk about anything political, friends over here, are mentioning it and bringing it up. So it is something, just so people in America who are interested in it, it is something that is happening and that's being talked about now. What it's going to turn out to be, though, if they make deals or whatever, Yah knows. But it is something that is being talked about and discussed. For us personally, at the moment, it is not affecting us too much. To be honest, it depends on what we end up doing for work. If we end up doing stuff between the two countries, that's where I started paying more attention. As I was like, supply.
We'll see how it ends up being
supplies.
affected.
Yeah. So there is that also. And the people, I joked with Tom the other day. So our caravan, I don't know if we've talked about this before or not. Our caravan and our van are both registered in Germany. So we have German license plates. So nobody knows that we're American until we open up our mouths. Yeah. And then they know. But it's just interesting because we hadn't felt any, a little bit, but we haven't felt like anything like animosity against Americans in our travels. No. At all, pretty much, actually. It's interesting because we are in caravans. We are with, I don't know if you call them regular people. We're not staying in the big fancy hotels. Oh, right. Where all of the American business people are staying, which is fine, but you do get a different view of other countries if you're staying in hotels only than if you're staying in campsites, because campsites you're gonna get you just regular people you talk to and stuff. So older retirees or business people, who have some of them have ginormous motorhomes. But on average. But the average people at the campsites are just regular people. Yeah. Regular level of income people. Yeah. And so some of them will talk. Yeah. Some of them will talk, and some of them will talk to us about politics and stuff. Yeah. Like down in Albania and Germany and Austria and stuff. Yeah. But most didn't. So we actually haven't found much animosity at all where we've gone to. Right. It's been very interesting having conversations with Europeans about, and it has been enlightening. It's been eye-opening to realize how much Europe talks about U.S. politics and how much it affects more of the worldscape than we realized, because most of our lives were lived in America to this point. I know most of mine was. You said our lives. I was like, well, but in growing up, you weren't as aware of as much of the politics and stuff, just because we weren't as concerned about stuff. Yeah. Growing up, but it's been really interesting. Yeah, to see how things affect other things in the world. So anyway. Yep. Enough of our political thing for today that we don't normally do. Speaking of returning to old paths, if you heat with firewood,
the normal alternatives are you split by hand with a maul or an axe, and you need to be fit enough and coordinated enough to do that and to sustain it, or you use a gas or electric powered hydraulic splitter and you split wood the noisy, slow way that requires a lot of maintenance, parts, and upkeep, cost,
and
fuel, oil, spark plugs, clogged carburetors, all of those things. There is an alternative though, and it's called a manual or a kinetic log splitter. And I spent 7 years designing this log splitter, and essentially it's like being able to split wood with a 95-pound splitting maul. Normally they're like 8 pounds, but this one is 95 pounds worth in that splitting head. But you're not having to lift all that weight, and you're not having to aim it either. You're simply guiding it up and down and allowing the momentum of all that weight to crack its way through your firewood. And a car suspension spring that can get out of a wrecking yard lifts that weight, holds it in suspension. The rigid frame holds it so that the axe strikes in the same exact place on the splitting table as always. It also has an elevated and fully adjustable work table surface, so you can stand upright the whole time you're splitting firewood, and it's just a great all-around way to split your firewood safer, faster, and really nice and quiet as well. Because you build it yourself, you know how to fix it if it breaks, but it is way less prone to breaking because there's very few moving parts and very little complication, and it's all just old school physics and really heavy construction that will hold up and last for a long time, even generations.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to weld and don't have the time, then you can go ahead and have someone do it for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we want people to be able to do it.
Everybody has that person they know in their friend circle or relatives, an uncle or a cousin or a brother or whatever, who is always tinkering in the shop and has a welder and loves projects. You can connect with somebody like that, partner with them, and make an agreement of, hey, I'll buy the plans if you will build this for me. It's very thorough step-by-step plans of mechanical style drawings that anyone can read. It's not just for engineers, it's for just everyday people, that can find their way around the shop and know how to do some basic stuff. So you can partner with them, they can help you build it, and then the two of you can share the machine. I made it to be portable with an axle and very large tires on it, so you can carefully tow it behind a vehicle or easily roll it up onto a highway rated trailer and take it over to your friend's house or your neighbor's property or the back 40. I especially made it so that you could hook it up to your four-wheeler or side-by-side, take it out to the back of your property, right to where your wood is, so you can process stuff up. You can also make it a stationary model without the wheels, to just, if you don't want to round up those extra parts or have a simpler, faster build, you can build a stationary model, always with the option of converting it to a mobile, towable version at a later date. So anyway, check that out at paulbunyanwoodchopper.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Nomadic Homesteaders podcast. May Yah bless you as you seek his face and seek his ways. And for everybody preparing for or celebrating Passover, perhaps even right now, shalom, and enjoy this time with God and with each other. Shalom. See you later.